Good morning and welcome to Caymanian Proud, Memories of Her Majesty. It gives the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage great pleasure to welcome Her Majesty's representative in the Cayman Islands to this event. His Excellency, the Governor, Martin Roper, is attending his second Caymanian Proud and first Platinum Jubilee event, along with our intergeneration audience here at the Harkwell Theatre and viewers at home. As the ministry responsible for promoting and supporting culture and heritage, we have set out to celebrate Her Majesty's 70-year reign with an event that informs, educates, and entertains. Caymanian Proud, Memories of Her Majesty, is designed to connect people by providing a forum to share recollections and insights of the Queen through a uniquely Caymanian lens. In doing so, we hope to touch on what the institution of the monarchy means to Caymanians and how that relationship continues to define our connection to the United Kingdom. The monarch's visits in 1983 and 1994 were highly anticipated national events, which gave islanders and residents a chance to see Her Majesty up close, while also letting us see that our beloved islands through her eyes. Memories of Her Majesty therefore allows us a rare opportunity to hear the memories of both government officials and members of the public of those two state visits. This morning's first session, Official Memories of Her Majesty, will offer up intriguing behind-the-scene insights involved in the meticulous planned state visits of the UK's longest reigning monarch. We will break for refreshments before launching into the second half of the session, appropriately titled People's Memories of Her Majesty. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining us for a morning filled with snapshots in time. I'm sure you will leave here at the end of the day with some interesting and truly inspiring remembrances of Her Majesty's royal visits. I now hand you over to the Acting Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage, Mr. Isaac Rankin.
Good morning, everyone. I want to again welcome you to the Caymanian Proud Memories of Her Majesty. But first and foremost, I'd like us to thank the Chief Officer, Teresa Echenike, and the Ministry for organizing this event. And in saying that, I'd like you all to give them a warm round of applause because they did a fantastic job. Protocol having been established, I feel immensely proud to be standing in for the Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture, and Heritage, who is currently away on official business. With the rapid change in our islands over the past 50 years, it is reassuring to reflect on two defining moments in our history: the state visits of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in 1983 and in 1994. Today, we are allowed the opportunity to have this forum to reflect on a rich and largely undiscussed era of our history. I was a teenager at around the time of Her Majesty's first visit in 1983. And I remember it vividly because I was honored to be one of the teenagers who actually got to meet Prince Philip in person. So to talk to the Duke of Edinburgh about the internationally recognized award scheme, that was very, very special to me. Many Caymanians were delighted at the prospect of the royal tour as it provided a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet the monarch. The older generations especially were delighted as many were brought up to have a reverence and affection for the royal family. The royal tour was dominated the national conversation for weeks, and every step of the tour was, of course, covered by our local media, including our own Radio Cayman. It is also safe to say that the royal tour in 1994 was a clear indication that the Queen and Prince Philip had enjoyed their first visit, and this spoke to their interest in our beloved Cayman Islands. Therefore, I'm looking forward to experiencing the visits through the memories of our fellow Caymanians and residents. For the students in our audience and watching at home, I'm sure that the Caymanian Proud Memories of Her Majesty will help to spark further discussions and create new memories as we embark on this year-long celebration of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Thank you so much.
At this time, I'd ask Pastor Alson Ebanks to offer a word of prayer.
Shall we pray? Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the department and the persons and the citizens of the community, everyone who has been looking forward to this event, but also a time where we can reflect on the past. In the midst of a world that's full of chaos, we thank you, Father God, that we have this moment to reflect. We pray that you would guide our conversation, the discussion today, the reflections and the remembrances of the past, so that it will be something that would not only bless those of us who were participants of that time, but especially our children who were not there to experience it as we were. We commit this entire time to you through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Al. I now invite the students of Sir John A. Cumber to the stage for the singing of the national song and anthem. And at that time, I ask you, if possible, please stand. At this time, I would like to invite the Cabinet Secretary for the Cayman Islands, Mr. Samuel Rose, to the stage to give some remarks on behalf of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Committee.
Good morning, and thank you, Ms. Connolly, for this invitation this morning to this wonderful event as we take a retrospective look at the visits of Her Majesty the Queen to the Cayman Islands. It is indeed a pleasure to offer some greetings on behalf of the Platinum Jubilee Steering Committee, which I have the privilege of chairing, and I wish to thank His Excellency the Governor for his vision for ensuring that Cayman really pulled out all the stops to celebrate this incredible milestone by Her Majesty the Queen. Our relationship with Her Majesty the Queen is something that defines us as Caymanians, especially with the beautiful students from our Sir John A. Cumber Primary this morning. I think back to my days as a student, which I like to think weren't so long ago. I recall when I left Cayman and went to attend university in Texas, I remember receiving a letter in the mail from the Scholarship Secretariat or the Education Department at the time. And you know, it came in a manila envelope. And you know what it said on top of that envelope? On Her Majesty's service. And everyone inside the university, everyone in the mail room, and were looking at me and saying, who are you? Who is Her Majesty? Where are you getting this thing from? It was this moment of awe. And they asked me if I was James Bond, you know. And to be honest with you, I never thought until that time, until that moment, as a 19-year-old, you know, in college, I never gave it much thought as to what does this relationship actually mean? What does it mean to be a citizen of a British overseas territory and to have a queen? And I do recall both visits. I recall waving my flag near the airport when she arrived in 1983 on her first royal visit. And then I recall very fondly and very clearly some of the events around her visit in 1994. And so I really commend the effort of the ministry. I wish to thank the minister who is absent today, the Honorable Bernie Bush, as well as Acting Minister Honorable Isaac Rankin and Chief Officer Teresa Echenike and their phenomenal team for jumping on this to take it in a whole nother direction and to draw out the reflections and the memories of some of our fine Caymanians here this morning, because this is very important and it's a moment in history that will never ever happen again. So we are inviting individuals in the community to come on board with us as we celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. We do have many exciting events lined up and planned throughout the year. And of course, I think everyone's looking forward to the very long and exciting long public holiday weekend in June. But we don't want this to be just about June only. We have opportunities to celebrate throughout the year. And so that is what the ministry has done today in putting this on. So again, I just want to say thank you to them for the efforts. Please inform yourselves and please look into what the events are. We have a website up and running now, and events are being added from time to time. And it's, like I said, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get together and to think about the significance and the importance of Her Majesty in our lives as Caymanian people. So I'm looking forward to hearing and to watching. And again, I want to say a warm welcome to those who will be watching via CIG TV or streaming this event today or watching it on replay. This is worth your time. Thank you again and congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. At this time, I'm going to ask our platform guests if they join the general audience. We're going to show a clip from a documentary done on Her Majesty's 1994 visit to the Cayman Islands. So I do want everyone to enjoy and be able to see this. So as our platform guest joins the audience, we will begin that.
On the steps of the Legislative Assembly, the investiture, a proud day for the Cayman Islands. Her Majesty the Queen to confer the honor of knighthood on a Caymanian, Sir Vassal Johnson, Knight Bachelor. The honor comes after a dedicated career to building Cayman's offshore financial industry, serving for 17 years as the Financial Secretary of the Cayman Islands. Sir Vassal laid the foundation for the financial industry by spearheading the introduction of laws protecting confidentiality, the Banks and Trust Company's regulations law, insurance legislation, and by abolishing exchange control laws. The Most Excellent Order of the British Empire was established to reward subjects who have rendered services of a conspicuous character. Cayman's current financial secretary, the Honorable George Anthony McCarthy, was awarded the OBE. Mr. McCarthy serves as head of the portfolio of finance and development. The honors were announced in the 1994 New Year's honors. The Honorable Truman Murray Bodden, Minister of Education, Culture, and Aviation, officer in the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. Since his election to government this term, he has put the national airline back on the road to recovery. Donovan Ebanks, a chartered civil engineer, has been chief engineer and director of public works for the Cayman Islands for the past 10 years. Mr. Ebanks is the son of one of the longest-serving members of the legislature, Mr. Cradock Ebanks, a retired elected representative for the District of North Side. Mr. Henry Proper, head of McAlpine's Caribbean Division, has been awarded the MBE for services to the construction industry and the development infrastructurally of the Cayman Islands. After 27 years of loyal and dedicated service to the Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Patrick Johnson, Deputy Director, received the MBE. Mr. Johnson joined the department in 1967 as one of 3 air traffic control officers. Police Long Service and Good Conduct medals were awarded to 4 of Her Majesty's Royal Cayman Islands Police. Chief Superintendent Buell Braggs, RVM, assumed control of the uniform branch earlier this month, was awarded the medal. Superintendent Braggs has served in a number of senior posts since joining the force in 1976. Inspector Donald Watler joined the RCIP in 1976 as a constable. During his 18-year service, he has worked at Government House and the Central Police Station, among other postings. Sergeant Ernie Rivers has received 6 commendations during his career with RCIP. He has worked in several areas of the force, rotating between the Central Police Station, Cayman Brac, and the West Bay and Boddentown substations, currently serving at the latter. He has been on the force since 1976. Constable David Bush also joined the force in 1976. He managed the 1st Criminal Investigation Department office in West Bay. Since 1986, he has been assigned to Government House, serving as driver to His Excellency the Governor. The Cayman Islands Certificate and Badge of Honor to Mrs. Teresa Tessa Bodden, recognized for her service in the area of drug prevention and rehabilitation and community service. Mrs. Bodden was among the first appointed to serve on the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. She has been a member and leader of several service and community organizations and has served on a number of government boards. Mrs. Marge Maureen Quinlan, principal of the Lighthouse School. Mrs. Quinlan's involvement in the special education field commenced with her appointment in 1983 as the Education Department's teacher responsible for the implementation and development of curriculum for students with learning difficulties. She is one of the founding members of the Special Olympics Association in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Spellman Astley McLaughlin, a Cayman Bracker, joined the civil service over 30 years ago. For 12 of those years, he performed a variety of roles as Little Cayman's district officer. He was the police, customs, and even assisted in air arrivals and departures. He retired from the Customs Department in 1990 as a senior customs officer. He was born in Creek, Cayman Brac in 1929, and following graduation from high school, served as a merchant seaman for nearly 30 years. Following the investiture, it was time for gift giving, and father of the house, as he's been referred to, since he is the longest-serving member, the Honorable John McLean officially welcomed the Queen and presented her with a gift. It is a Caymanite sculpture featuring 2 hawksbill turtles. It was designed and created by Mr. Eddie Scott of Cayman Brac. The turtles are mounted on a base of solid East End Caymanite. Her Majesty's first walkabout, a time for her to bestow the personal touch, to chat briefly with the public along the route from the Assembly to the CIBC building. Hundreds of people and a number of children line the streets, waving flags, using every available angle to get a glimpse. On February 8, 1994, the Cayman Islands National Museum opened a special exhibit to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the wreck of the 10 Sail. Her Majesty's ship Convert and 9 vessels of her 58-ship merchant convoy crashed into the eastern reefs of Grand Cayman in 1794. Caymanians assisted in saving about 400 shipwreck victims. The wreck of the 10 Sail is the most famous maritime disaster in our island's history and the source of our island's best-loved legend. While inside, Her Majesty and His Royal Highness were guided through the special exhibit by Director of the Museum Anita Ebanks and Curator William Tennant. Before leaving, the Honorable Truman Bodden presented Her Majesty with a gift of a paper sculpture of the sister ship to the HMS Convert. The sculpture was created by Mr. Gerald Hebert, a local resident from Canada, previously a member of the museum staff. Following the museum visit, the royal couple were the guests of honor at a reception at Government House.
As you can see, all of the islands turned out for Her Majesty's visit. And if you noticed, some of those people that were on that video are here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and invite our panelists and our moderator back to the stage. While they're coming back, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping for us. So we have not just this event today, but we're also extending this and taking this event over to Cayman Brac next week. In the Brac, we will be doing a number of things as a ministry because we don't often get over to our sister islands, but we never want to leave them out. So while we're over on the Brac next week, we will have a youth forum, speaking to our student councils over there and talking about things that the youth are seeing in our world today and things that they feel that need to be looked at from the youth perspective. We will also, as I said, be having another Caymanian Proud event over there and encouraging the older generation, as well as younger too, of the Sister Islands to come out and join us and share their memories. And then we will top off the weekend with having our own, very own Cayman Islands National Folk Singers giving a free concert in the Brac. I think that's the most part I'm looking forward to because I enjoy listening to the folk singers and the older songs as they recount them. Okay, and if our panel is ready, Pastor Al, can I hand over to you? All right, enjoy your day.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm sure that those of you who were at the event that was recently featured in this video, in particular, I'm sure Ms. Anita would remember that, and Mr. Ryan would remember that. Zeta Mae, you're old enough to remember that. Lennon was working there, so he would remember that. I also remember it from the inside, but not all that went on the outside. But, of course, I believe we want to reflect even beyond the 1994 event back to 1983, which of course was the first visit of Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. And in addition to the two things we'll be looking at, which is the opening of Queen's Highway and also looking at the opening of the Pines Retirement Home, there were visits to other very special places, including the turtle farm at that time down at Goat Rock. And I have vivid memories of that because I was working there, working then with Radio Cayman, and I remember trying to make sure that we had something for the radio, so I pushed myself right in the middle and stuck the microphone pretty close to the Duke of Edinburgh. And he said, in fact, he said, "Where are you from?" Radio Cayman, sir. His security task force did not think I was trying to kill the Duke, so I was not arrested. But today we want to reflect on the event of starting with 1983, and on our panel with me right now we have Miss Zeta Mae Bodden, and we have Mr. James Ryan, and we have Miss Anita Ebanks and Mr. Lennon Christian. And I'm just going to give them a moment or two just to introduce themselves in terms of what or where they were and what their role was at that time. Ms. Zeta Mae.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zeta Mae Bodden, MBE, and I am from the District of West Bay. So it was a great, an exciting time when the Queen was coming. I remember we all rushing around and bustling and making sure everything was okay, and there's signs over the main streets. I remember we getting ladders and trying to get up the sign over by the West Bay Fire Station. Right there was 2 light poles, and we used to put signs up there, you know, to welcome the Queen to the district. And you know, it was such a thing with everybody just being exciting. I've never seen another event like that in the Cayman Islands back in '83, where everybody was out there, and the little store Yankee Ocean, everybody was, and the museum, buying their flags and everything. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful occasion that we got to see Her Majesty the Queen actually step foot on the Cayman Islands.
Mr. Ryan, your role at that time, you were not a retiree at that point.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. In 1983, I was the district commissioner in Cayman, and Her Majesty was traveling on a 4-engine jet aircraft, and that meant that she could not land in the BRAC, but the sister islands did not want to be left out, in a sense, and the principal and teacher and students from Spot Bay Primary School took on a task. They painted on the roof of the warehouse at the creek near the dock the words, "We love our Queen," and it was painted in very large letters. And I was invited to take part here in Grand Cayman, but I asked the people of Cayman to turn out at the dock to wave to Her Majesty. And subsequently, Her Majesty said to me, and she said publicly, that the RAF were very kind and flew very low as it passed the north coast of Cayman. And she said I was able to read the message that the people of the sister islands had put there for me, even though I was not able to land.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Some of those details we wouldn't have known. Important. Miss Anita, of course, we saw you in the picture. Your role then at the National Museum.
Yes, good morning. I can't believe nearly 30 years ago, I'm sure some of the students here, some of your parents might have been waving a flag there. Yes, I was the National Museum's director at that time, and I don't know if you want me to talk about.
No. Well, basically, that's just to get an idea of what your role was at the time. We're going to talk about some of the other things a little later on. And Lennon Christian.
Yes, good morning. Great to be here with this esteemed panel and with His Excellency and the other guests. Just to share a few words, going back to '83, I had to dig up some memories and clear some cobwebs. But, you know, as a teenager back then, working with the Cayman Islands News Bureau, it was an exciting time for me, obviously, my entire family, the entire country. I think Comart ran out of hats that year. Fancy suits were, you know, everywhere, decorations, bunting, flags. But in terms of my role, I was working, as I said, with the News Bureau. I was a junior officer there. And our role was to plan, not just communicate, but plan and facilitate the entire visit, working, of course, with the Chief Secretary and the government. So we coordinated everything, planned routes, of course. An advance team came down from the UK, sorry. The recce team, the reconnaissance team, and we traveled the route. We decided on the stops. We planned every step, every type of terrain. If she was walking on gravel or flat or inclined slope, it was noted. And the communication part of it, the photography, the writing, all of that was exciting because we had to do advanced publicity. Of course, there were members of the media from the UK, from America as well, around the region. So it was an exciting time as a teenager, just starting out in the business. So I look forward to the rest of the recollections and memories. There are some highlights, including the bracket. I'm especially proud to have been involved in the transition, as you may have seen. When she came in '83, she received a black coral gift. Very beautiful black coral horse and corgis. But by the time she came back in '94, they were looking for a gift, and I managed to convince them to use this mysterious thing called Caymanite. So we got some samples from Mr. Scott in the BRAC, and as you saw in the video, some beautiful Caymanite turtles were presented to her and the Duke. So some memories like that are coming back.
Well, thank you. Again, as I said earlier, you hear some of these unique memories and remembrances at this time. One of the disadvantages we have on the stage here is that we really can't see who's in the audience. We suspect that His Excellency is still here. There, good. And I believe that I saw Mr. Loxley Banks earlier. He's still here. Maybe your eyes are better acclimated to dark spaces than mine. But of course, I was wondering why Loxley was not up here, because his memories subsume all of ours, and he could share a whole lot as well. But again, thanking those of you who are here for being able to reflect with us later on in the program. We are running behind the schedule that was presented to me. Now, when I worked in radio, that was a sin. You could not be behind schedule. You had to be on the target. So someone who's producing this program would have to tell me what the adjustment is going to be so that, you know, well, I won't be able to see that sign. So you probably have to come up on stage and say, well, it's time for you to wrap up so we can move on. But what we want to focus here on this particular time slot is really looking at Her Majesty's visit in that 1993 or 83 visit, and in particular looking at the very important event of the opening of the Queen's Highway. I said, as we have noted really, Her Majesty at that time visited other places, including His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh visited as well. But that was a very important event in our memories. And I just wonder whether any of the panelists had an opportunity to actually be there for the opening. I would assume that Mr. Lennon Christian, as a member of, at that time, what we was referred to as the Cayman Islands News Bureau, that you would have been there. Just very briefly, we don't have time to go into all of our memories, but maybe the highlights of as you recall, for that.
Well, that is a historic site, not just because it has a nice view of the sea, but because it opened up that huge section of the island from Gun Bay, East End, Central, all the way down to Frank Sound. There was no road, obviously, until that highway was built. And for the residents, that was a big deal. When it was commissioned, especially by the Queen, that was even bigger. And of course, it's a small district, but it was even less populated back then. But everyone, of course, came out. The area of the monument where it was opened is very undeveloped, so there was a lot of space for people to stand around, get a clear view of the proceedings. And it was a very memorable occasion. I think it's probably the biggest thing in East End since the Wreck of the 10 Sails, that was. But yeah, everyone was in their Sunday best. And it was a short stop there for the ceremony, the proceedings, but it was enjoyed, from what I recall, by everyone who was there.
Any other panelists happen to have the opportunity to go there?
I attended that event, and I remember the East End people saying, now we have another route. Mm-hmm. And so, it was a big thing for them because it made it a shorter run if they wanted to go to North Side.
Right. Yes, I think we will reflect on that, and one of the things that subsequently we find that every advancement comes with some negative things, and one of the things that we have since that time sort of thought, well, there goes another way of killing our native iguanas, which actually is the truth. So we have to be careful when we talk about development. It comes with wonderful things, but sometimes there's some negatives. But we're looking at the positives of that time because it did open a route, as Lennon said, between East End and then the other. Right now, of course, those who live in that area want another route because of the traffic issues. So, in a sense, that event happened. And I think, Lennon, you highlighted the significance. But from the perspective of working and operating there in the civil service and government, Mr. Ryan, how would you sort of categorize that event itself, the opening of the Queen's Highway, in terms of the significance of it?
Well, I did not actually attend that because I was busy with other things, as you can appreciate. Civil servants had a lot of things to do before and during, even after the visit. But as Lennon pointed out, it opened a previously closed area, and it really put East End and North Side a bit more on the map by making them both more accessible.
Right. Appreciate that. Miss Anita, any peculiarities about that event itself? Were you able to go there as well? Or you were stuck?
No. And
right.
In 1983.
Right. Now, of course, in addition to the opening of the Queen's Highway, we had another very important event. And one of the things that I found that I'm sure that those who were working with either the radio station, we didn't have television, or with the GIS, I call it the modern name for it, the News Bureau, we had to go from one district to the other, trying to get there to make sure we were on time, and then find our own location where we could be set up so that we could actually be able to report what we were seeing, not just what other people were seeing. So that was, the logistics of that was something on its own, especially at that time. We had the opening then of the Queen's Highway as a significant event, And we also had the opening of the Pines Retirement Home. And I think we all recognize that that was still, we still have the ongoing benefits of that today. Any of you panelists were actually able to attend that event, the opening of the Pines Retirement Home?
I do.
You were everywhere that day, right? And you?
Yes.
Okay, so we start with you this time.
Well, I remember where the Pines is right behind the hospital. So I remember if you weren't an invited guest, you know, to be up front, that's where we stood, you know, around the back of the hospital, looking towards the Pines. But Her Majesty was very gracious, you know, and she did present herself that we could also see her. But I remember Miss Olive being very, very touched that the Queen was, you know, here on the island and that she was doing this for the Pines Retirement Home.
When you say Miss Olive, just for history's sake, who are you talking about?
Miss Olive Miller.
Yes, of blessed memory.
Of blessed memory.
Right.
Yes.
Let's talk briefly the significance of that opening and the significance of that place. Anyone want to comment to that?
Well, generally speaking, well, I want to first also acknowledge Miss Olive Miller and some of the other amazing people that were there, 83. We had people, legendary people like Miss Anita Bodden, parliamentarian and lawyer. Of course, we had the Bodden government, Jim Hague and Truman. We had lots of dignitaries. But the significance of the Pines Retirement Home at that center was, at that event, was a momentous occasion, not necessarily positive, but realistically in our cultural development. Traditionally, as people got older, some relative, child, niece, somebody would take care of the elderly at their homes. But as we began to develop and more people wanted to work and start careers, of course, we needed a place where we could put our elderly citizens who needed assistance in their golden years. And the Pines Retirement Home, and as you said, conveniently located next to the hospital, they could rest, and if they needed help or assistance, the hospital was there. So that was a valuable service back then, and it remains so today as well.
Anybody else want to comment on the significance of it? Well, I understand that Mr. George McCarthy is here with us. I'm not sure where we're going to sit him, but I can't see you if you're here, George. But if you are, you want to come to join us on the platform, we'll be happy to have you come and join us, and someone will find a place to present you. But you know, there are lots of things that people remember about that occasion. What we saw on the video, of course, was our second visit. And the second visit, of course, it was quite obvious that the Queen had our left arm in there. She didn't wear it all the time, but it was apparently had fallen off a horse and had sprained or fractured her wrist or arm. We don't have video. Mr. McCarthy, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone.
I don't know if you want to just add anything to what we've covered already. We talked about the Queen's Highway opening and also the Pines in terms of any memories you have of the significance or any unique things that others of us may not have had insight in because we were not part of that thing.
I'm not able to comment on what the events in 1983 because I was then off at university studying. I can only talk about what occurred in 1994.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I was then the financial secretary, having been appointed in 1992.
Right.
Yeah.
In that context, it's the one in which you were featured. in the video earlier. But we're going to consider a bit more the significance of this 1983 visit, the significance to us in Cayman, that whether you were there or not, to reflect on the significance of it. One of the things I think that we would remember is just prior to that event, there was something called the Falklands War.
Yeah.
Now, can anybody tell me, based on your knowledge and experience, the connection between the Falklands War and the Queen's, the first visit that we had of a reigning monarch? Mr. Ryan?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. The Falklands War, although we were far removed from it, we felt very much, I guess I should say, a part of it from the standpoint of raising funds to help the UK government. And the three islands all raised funds for it. The government put in some additional funds to make the amount $500,000, and the Chief Secretary at the time, the late Mr. Dennis Foster, made the trek to Buckingham Palace to take and present the check to Her Majesty, and I'm told that that was one of the main things that triggered the visit later on of Her Majesty and His Royal Highness Prince Philip.
Well, no one has reconfigured history to take that fact out, so thank God we still remember the same thing. Now, of blessed memory, there was someone who worked at the Legislative Assembly at that time.
Yes, yes.
You want to reflect on that? Because it's all part of the story.
Definitely.
Who was that?
Well, the Sergeant at Arms at the time was Mr. Burt Watler.
Yes.
Mr. Burt Watler.
And he is the one, I don't know if he conceived it, but he definitely led the charge to raise funds. He called it Mother Needs Her Help.
Mother needs your help.
Mother needs her help, and he led the government, the country, the society, in raising funds, not just to raise funds, but 82 was just a year before the Queen visited us. And, you know, the Falkland Islands are off Argentina, which is in South America, not far away from us, really. So just emerging with fresh memories of World War II, Vietnam and Korea, other wars that our men have fought in, it was very fresh in our minds. So that not symbolic, but the actual act of England going to the protection of its territory was a big thing for us, because we're probably one of the smallest territories there are. So if they would go to the Falkland Islands, which we probably hadn't heard of before then we felt assured that, yeah, she has her back. You know, England, the crown is behind us.
Yes.
So it was 500,000 pounds, I think.
500,000 pounds,
yeah.
Correct.
And of course, that was also in the middle of the Cold War era, you know, Cuba, America, all those things were still happening. But it was a momentous occasion, and Mr. Watler definitely performed valiantly there.
Captain Keith Tibbetts, the late Captain Keith Tibbetts, took up the charge in Cayman Bragg. I was district commissioner at the time, and I attended and spoke at a number of public meetings as we encouraged people in the sister islands to contribute in much the same way as Mr. Burt Watler did in Grand Cayman. Yeah.
Does anyone know on the panel here whether Her Majesty made any comments while she was here on that visit regarding that act of generosity by the Cayman Islands?
I recall some mention being made, but I can't pinpoint from memory exactly when it was.
I think it's the significance, again, of the event for us was that it was the first visit of a reigning monarch. That was very, very important.
I would just share, sorry, at the very end of her official speech at that visit, she didn't directly mention it, but she said, "My government are pleased with the friendly relations that exist between the Cayman Islands and the surrounding territories." And she went on to mention, the support of various agencies. She didn't directly mention the donation, but she spoke briefly of the friendly relations.
Right.
Mr. Moderator, there was one other issue at the 1983 visit. The governor at the time arranged for a cross-section of people from the Cayman Islands to be presented to Her Majesty or to His Royal Highness Prince Philip. And we made 2 lines of people down in the front lawn at Government House, and senior civil servants were appointed marshals. I was one of the marshals, and we had to present a couple to one or the other. We were introduced to both Her Majesty and His Royal Highness, and then Her Majesty came down one side, and His Royal Highness went up on the other side, and the marshals were stationed along the way, and I presented a couple that His Royal Highness had an interest in birds, and they were involved in ornithology, and but there were persons in the group that were involved with the fundraising for the Falklands War as well.
Mr. Moderator, before we move on, I need to correct something that I said earlier. I'm looking at the Queen's speech again. Sorry, it's in the 3rd paragraph. But she did directly mention her donation. She said, "I was much moved by the message of loyalty and support sent to me by His Excellency the Governor at the time of the Falkland Islands conflict, and also by the generous donation of £500,000 from the government and people of these islands for the South Atlantic Fund." So she did specifically mention
that's
that.
where I recall from.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So that was, was significant in a sense. Like the Falkland Islands, up until recently, there were names on maps that said the Cayman Islands, but somehow the cartographers couldn't find enough digits to put us on there. So they're looking for the Falklands Islands at those times. Where are they? Where are the Cayman Islands? So I think it's that we are more significant than our size would indicate. But we're so thankful that we had those visits. In particular, right now, we're talking about the one in 1983. We want to use our time wisely. We can't cover everything, but was there anything more personal, of a more personal nature that anyone would recall? Again, for the 4 panelists who were actually present and active in any of those events during the 1983 visit, concerning any conversations, any things that someone might have even reflected to you if you didn't have it yourself. One of the things that I think you've mentioned, Lennon, that Comart or whoever it was that sold all the hats, significance of making sure that people were dressed appropriately. Now, the Pines retirement home visit, which I think we had after the opening of the Queen's Highway. Anyone would have any reflection on anything that she may have said there, or any encounter with anyone? Zeta Mae, you were everywhere, but you might not remember everything.
No, I don't recall. After she came, she did what she had to do and she left. Then, people kind of congregated and had conversations with each other. She said this, or, like, I was so nervous, I wish, I didn't know which hand to shake when she put out her hand. It was just that they were so excited and nervous and, everything put together. But, like I said, people met afterwards. And, they hung around because at those things, it was always some refreshments and stuff like that. So people hung around and they chit-chatted with each other. But everything that she did on her visits were a momentous occasion for the Cayman Islands and its people.
Well, I think a little later on we have an opportunity maybe for some people in the audience to share their own recollections. We're looking at it from the sort of the official aspect of it. You had the opening of the Queen's Highway, and then the opening of the Pines Retirement Home itself.
Yes, in terms of momentous comments or conversations, of course the Prince is well known for some flavorful, colorful remarks during his visits. And actually, in preparing for this, I interviewed someone this week who confirmed, who was there and who heard firsthand, that he did make a very colorful remark that was sort of humorous, and it's been circulated in terms of where did the Caymanians descend from. But I'll let you all research that one. But I have confirmed it this week from someone who's actually there, that he did make this comment regarding the history, the heritage of Caymanians.
Right. I'll need to do my research.
Oh, this was in 83 or 1994. 1994, my understanding.
94.
And it was the international press picked up the story.
Yes.
His question, I didn't see anything wrong with it because, in fact, our national festival is Pirates Week. So anyway.
So the comment was, since the cat is out of the bag, his comment was something to the effect to someone in the audience. So then I presume that you all are descended from pirates, was his, I think, the gist of his comment. But it was reported, so,
Yeah. And
Mr. Moderator, since 1994 has been tapped on, I would just like to mention that I was invited by the then Governor Gore, to host a luncheon for Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince. And like Miss Zeta Mae, when Governor Gore spoke to me, for 2 nights I didn't sleep because I could not imagine what it would be like to be engaging in conversation with Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince. But anyway, on the particular day of the luncheon, I introduced the Queen to the then members of the Government Private Sector Consultative Committee, and that committee comprised of ministers of cabinet, then members, and prominent members of our financial industry. And she spoke, she was very cordial, both her and the Duke, in terms of the conversations. And one of the things that that anyone would observe quite quickly, and particularly myself, was how well she is able to put those around her at ease. We were sitting at the table for lunch, and the server came and was about to take up her plate, and it had a piece of bread on it. And when he raised it, she put her hand on his and pulled it back and took the bread off and continued to eat. But I spoke to her about the financial industry, what it was about, and this, as you would have seen earlier, in terms of the recognition of the work that was done by Sir Vassar Johnson, our very first financial secretary, and it was good to see Sir Vassar being recognized in terms of the award that he received, and many others that were there, including myself. But she takes her conversation to a very personal level to find out in terms of, to inquire about the well-being of those that she's interacting with. And I remember later on, following the luncheon, there was a reception being held and members of the public had been gathered. And she was walking around, talking to the individuals that were assembled in front of the governor's residence. And she went to a couple and she said something to a gentleman. And he said to her, "Mom, you asked me the same question when you came here in 1983. What's wrong with your memory?" And you asked me the same thing again. And it was very amusing, and she laughed it off. Anyway, we went on to West Bay for the, there was an event being held. I think it was the opening of
Bush Field.
Bush Field. And a lady said to her, "Mrs. Queen, what's wrong with your hand?" And she said, "Well, I fell off a horse." She said, "You have to be careful at your age, you know. You don't do things like that." And, and she really, it would sound like a reprimand. And again, the Queen found it quite humorous. And it was quite an occasion of her visit. But more importantly, for us in the Cayman Islands, because up until 1983, as I mentioned, I was off studying then, we were often referred to as the islands that time forgot. But to see in terms of the way the Cayman Islands, the people of the Cayman Islands were quite resilient in terms of making a commitment to make the contribution. I tried to keep abreast of what was happening while I was studying, and to have raised £500,000. That was quite encouraging for somebody like myself to know that as an overseas territory, and the fact that we were regarded as the islands that time forgot, and to see that we had emerged onto the world stage, the people of the Cayman Islands were demonstrating their patriotism, but more significantly that in the event of anything, any form of threats that these islands would be faced with, we know we had the backing of Her Majesty the Queen and her government. That was quite encouraging for the people of the Cayman Islands and for somebody like myself.
Thank you for those remembrances. One of the things that has been reflected, and I don't have any way to compare it, some of you who are more knowledgeable and a little bit older might recognize that when you talk about £500,000 that was donated, compare that to what the Cayman Islands government's budget was just a few years, in a sense, before that.
Yeah.
So we have come, as I say, a long way, baby.
That would have been a significant percentage.
Right. I'm going to allow Mr. Ryan here. He has a comment to make, and then we're going to take a break.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, I wanted to pick up on the 1994 visit Mr. McCarthy has just spoken about, and two of the events were of great significance to me, and the first one was, of course, the investiture ceremony, and I was privileged to stand near Her Majesty and hand her the various medals that were being distributed, as you would have seen in the the video a while ago. And when we were doing the Cayman Island Certificate and Badges of Honor, she turned to me and said, I know what the medal is for, but what is the certificate for? So I had to explain to her that, like the Royal Awards, you get a medal, but there's also a certificate to go along with it. And she said, oh, now I understand. And of course, it was a great honor to be there to see Sir Basil Johnson knighted and the various other awards that were given. The second event that I wanted to comment on was the reception and dinner aboard the yacht. I think there were 42 people, as I recall, invited from the Cayman Islands, and my wife and I were privileged to be a part of, or to be two of those. And from Teachers College days, I disliked formal dinners. And from the time I got the invitation, I felt uncomfortable knowing that I was going to be attending this formal dinner with Her Majesty and His Royal Highness. But I have to say, and it was probably one of the most enjoyable times that I can recall. The staff from the palace, and of course Her Majesty traveled with quite a large entourage, and we were, husbands and wives were separated, and we were seated next to someone from the palace, and people went out of their way to make you feel at home. And I recall the various comments that were made, and it was really an enjoyable formal dinner, and one that that goes down in my memory.
And you wish more people could emulate that, eh? Well, we're going to pick back up when we come back. We're going to pick up on this on the 1994 royal visit with the fresher, probably, memories there and the significance of the investiture and so forth. But we're going to take a break right now, and then we'll return to that shortly.
This time we are talking about the people's memories of Her Majesty, and we are specifically dealing with the 1994 visit. Let me reintroduce the panel. We have to my right, extreme right, Ms. Anita Ebanks, and next to her, Mr. Lennon Christian. Then we have Ms. Zeta Mae Bodden, and on her left, we have the Honorable George McCarthy. So we want to begin, and I want to open with saying that the 1994 visit was, in many respects, distinctly different from the 1983 visit. And I want to throw that out to any of my panelists who want to say, to address as to how some of those differences as they see them between 83 and 94 were. Anita, would you like to begin?
Well, I wasn't involved with the 83 visit. The 94 I was involved with, so I really can't get into the big differences. I guess everyone was still, I guess, very excited about this 1984 visit of Her Majesty and Prince Philip, the royals, and really wanted to put their best foot forward. You know, they did a lot of planning to make sure that the royal visit would be a memorable one. It was important in terms of the museum because it was the 200th anniversary for the Wreck of the Ten Sail exhibit at the museum. I don't know whether I go into more about that or other people comment on the differences that they felt.
Yeah, I want to ask Mr. McCarthy a question. Mr. McCarthy, you weren't here for 1983. I recall you saying that. But in 1994, you took a significant part in that. I want you to tell us how you felt at being invested, awarded the MBE.
Yes, the investiture, Mr. Moderator, was both an honor and a humbling experience. It was an honor from the point of view of receiving the award from the hands of Her Majesty, the Queen. It was an honor from the point of view of being part of a distinguished group of Caymanians being presented to observe the investiture ceremony that day, and in particular to see the very first person in the Cayman Islands to be knighted, Sir Vassar Johnson. That was quite an event to observe, but it was humbling from the point of view of being recommended as one of the recipients of the award, and humbling from the point of view to be there and participating in this event.
Now I'm going to come back to Zeta Mae and Lennon, but I want to give the audience a chance to participate at this time. One of the things I recall a lot of excitement about was Her Majesty's visits to the various communities. So I want to ask the audience, any member of the audience, do you recall being in the crowd that were assembled that day for Her Majesty to visit? And what was your experience? Did you have a chance to get up close to her or even be in the vicinity of anyone close to whom she had conversation with? And would you care to share that experience with us? There should be a microphone available to you. We would love to hear that. Anyone?
My name is Marina Jefferson, and I had the wonderful privilege of being with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II when she was going to be opening the Ed Bush Field and Stadium in West Bay. And there was a number of older persons. They were very excited. They were right up close to the ropes. And one of them was my grand Aunt Julia Hydes of blessed memory. And Aunt Julia was very forthright and said to Her Majesty the Queen, I see you broke your arm. Now you just go ahead and you fall off another horse, you break another arm, you're gonna be in a mess. So, and I remember there was a lot of chuckling, a lot of laughter. Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II just was so excited, I think, to hear a local person of that age, who probably was, I think, in her late 90s, and she was just very jovial, I would say, and she expressed to her that she was going to be more careful, if I remember correctly. So I was very fortunate to have been standing close by and was able to introduce her to some of our older persons in West Bay. I think it was a wonderful time, and it was a gracious time, and I appreciate everything that was done, especially in 1994 at that particular setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rena. Is there anyone else in the audience who had a similar experience that they would like to share a brief anecdote with us? Anyone else in the audience before I?
Well, I'm the other Roy Bodden. And in 1994, I was with Radio Cayman, and I was privileged to make the announcements and what was happening at the Botanic Park, which was, if I'm not mistaken, was being opened in that year, right, 1994?
Yes.
Yes.
And so I was very close to her, actually. I would say maybe about two arms length away. And so, of course, making all the comments of what was happening around and things like that. So I was very privileged, as I said before, to be the announcer for Radio Cayman at that time to make the reports of what was happening at the Botanic Park. Thank you.
I want to put my good friend Loxley on the spot.
That's
Loxley,
right.
Can you give us, because I know you're a hive of activity, you were at Radio Cayman then, can you give us capture a little of the excitement or recapture a little of the excitement and share with us around those times?
Well, I'll take you back to, I guess it was when King George V died, to when she ascended to the throne. And that, I guess, was 51, 52. But anyway, we'll skip on up to 83 when she first came here, when she paid her first visit. I recall Mr. Foster was the chief secretary. And when all the planning started, he called me over and said, "Now, bossy, what are you going to do in this?" And I said, "Well, I think Radio Cayman has to play a very vital role in it." And as Alson made reference to, and Roy made reference to, we covered in the 83 tour, we covered every stop that she made from the time she landed at the airport, because the first 83 she came in by aircraft. We had the late Doran Miller was up on the roof of the old airport building, and from the airport building, when he finished his commentary, the late Joy Brandon picked up the commentary of her tour coming through Georgetown. She was up on the top of the Thompson building at the time, and the traffic was a little bit different than what it is these days. She came right by the Thompson building, and all over the island. In fact, Alson, as he made a mention before, covered the turtle farm, and then he went, we scooted him from there up to Morgan's Harbor, where you recall she went across from Morgan's Harbor to the Cabo. And we were rotating announcers and people all over the island on both occasions. So it was, I think the whole community was able to more or less partake in what she was doing on her visit here through Radio Cayman's coverage of it. And I skipped up to the 80 or 93 visit, the site which was dedicated as the record of 10 sales site was a Radio Cayman tower site. Some of you might recall we had a 125-foot broadcast tower up there. And when Governor Gore called and said, we want the site, I said, well, we got a 125-foot tower there. He said, well, it's got to come down. I said, well, if you want it down, then we don't have the money to take it down. So go, somebody else, we're going to have to come up with the money to take the tower down. Subsequently, we gave up the site because we had then started to transition from AM broadcasting into FM. And it was, I think everybody enjoyed every stop that she made, and it was, I think, a momentous occasion or two occasions for the whole community. And a reference was made to Mr. Burt Wadler. His efforts in gathering up the £500,000 for this Falkland Island, and and someone mentioned it didn't know whether it was his idea, but it was his idea, because I suppose maybe Radio Cayman was one of the first places that he called, because he knew he needed a lot of help to get this, because it was done quite quickly. And I told him, I said, well, you tell us what you want us to say, and we actually blanketed the airways with this this effort to raise this funds to send for the Falklands War. And there's so many other things that my memory goes back. I'm 84,
Thank you, Loxley.
84 years old, so you can take it from there.
Thank you. Since we have the microphone in the audience, I wonder if any other member of the audience would care to tell us something about their experience. Were you excited? Did you go to, when you heard the Queen was visiting and there was an opportunity probably for you to see her and get close to her? Did you do any special shopping? Any special preparations? Would someone in the audience care to? Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, hello. I'm Peggy Leshiker Denton, and I think Anita will tell you more about generally, about the museum and so forth. But at the time of the Queen's visit, I was doing archaeology in affiliation with the museum and Texas A&M University, and we had done a lot of a survey of the East End Reef, and I can tell you, Loxley, about the radio tower, because that was we used that as a range marker at that time. But I do remember when it was made into a monument, and I especially remember that Dr. Philip Pedley was there from the archive, and he had been instrumental in the museum joining with the archive in a little special publication, Our Island's Past, that focused on the wreck of the 10 sail. And that was made, Cayman Free Press and the archive made that available to school children for only like $2 a book, something like that. So it was a wonderful thing. There were volunteers who worked on that archaeology project who were able to meet the Queen as well. There was a wonderful gathering at Government House where there were lots of children and people in the community were invited there, and the Queen and Prince Philip passed by and made people feel very, very special. And then particularly for me, Anita was obviously the director of the museum at the time, and Bill Tennant was the curator. I was the archaeologist, and an exhibit had been made on the wreck of the tin sail, which was just a small part of her visit to the museum. She visited all the galleries. But she did come into that gallery, and I was there, and Lennon Christian was there, and Anita, and there were a number of people on the museum board who were there at the time. And she just walked into the small gallery, and she did have her arm in the sling because she'd fallen off the horse. But she was just so gracious. Everybody just felt terribly, terribly comfortable. And she walked around, she looked at things. And Prince Philip then, a naval man, began asking navigational questions about why did the convoy go, by Cuba, and, instead of going this other way. And so it was fun to be able to share some of those moments and to be in the Historic National Museum at that time. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, Zeta Mae.
Yes, sir.
You were and you are a hive of activity. Can you give us a brief synopsis of your experience? I see one of the things that you are a collector par excellence. You have any memorabilia. How did you prepare? Did you go shopping? Did you buy a special hat? Wear from a special dress?
Yes, I remember vividly blue-green dress I had for the opening of the Aid Bush, and a blue hat. And so I got to meet the Queen, and of course it was a buzz of activity because the Sir John A. Cumber Primary School Steel Band actually was playing some renditions for her, for the Queen. And then also the students from John A. Cumber and Wesleyan Church or school was there in the audience. They took up like one whole bleacher because they were going to sing the national song and national anthem. And so both my daughters were taking part in those activities. So it was really good. I took lots of photographs with the Queen, and she was led by our Honorable Speaker, Mr. McKeeva Bush, and he was introducing her to some of the elderly people. They were all in a line out on the at the Aid Bush field. They had a walkway, and then the bleachers were facing east, and the students were sitting on the bleachers, and then the steel band was actually under the big bleacher that is there. They were right under that, and she, stopped. And I remember Mr. Crawford doing like this, when she stopped in front of the steel band. He just like stopped, and he said, that was such a proud moment because the Queen, she was looking at the children playing the steel band, and she was like looking at the steel drums like, this makes such a beautiful music, And the students, they were so excited. I remember as she walked out and meeting the elderly people in between, that they started waving their flags. And I remember Mr. Courtney Perrin, a teacher at the school, he was leading the choir, and he was telling them, to calm down now, because keep your energy to sing and to meet her when she comes. But they were all excited, and they were waving their flags at that event, it was really, really exciting. That day, I mean, like all of West Bay, I think, came out. You know, they were lined all around the Bush field to watch her come in. And then, you know, some people were invited to actually meet her. Mostly the elderly folks got to meet her, and the other MLAs and stuff. They were all lined with their spouse at that event. And then at the Botanic Park, I remember she being led by Mr. Thomas Jefferson, who was a minister at the time, and, you know, of blessed memory. And he, you know, he was so excited, you know, to be introducing her. And I remember her arm was like this, and, you know, she reached over to lift the thing to unveil the plaque. And, you know, he was nervous that, you know, she was trying to do this with her arm and thing like that. And she kind of just nodded like, you know, I'm okay. I'm okay. You know, she just kind of nodded to him because she could see that he was kind of a little bit nervous because of her activities, what she had to do. Because the monument with the plaque was low down, you know, so that meant that she had to sort of lean over to do it. But she put him at ease, you know. She just kind of looked at him and nodded, and, you know, I'm okay.
Now, was there anyone in the audience who were at the...
Somebody has their hand up.
Sorry.
Good morning, all. I remember 1994. It was such a great experience for me. At the time, I worked in tourism, and I was at the Grand Pavilion Hotel working as assistant front office manager. And I remember we were preparing for this occasion from like 2 weeks, making sure that everything was done in order. We had to make sure that our uniform was in order. Everything was prepared immaculately. I mean, we spread the red carpet for the Queen, and it was such an honor. I remember all of us being so excited and happy that the Queen was coming, because a lot of people that were working there, I think it was only myself and someone else was working there that were Caymanians. The others were foreigners, and they were like so excited. Wow, the Queen is coming to the Cayman Islands. You guys are so blessed. And I felt so proud to, you know, give them a brief history of the Cayman Islands and what, you know, what we represent under the Queen. So it was really an experience that for me to pass on to my children and my grandkids, because now my children were small at the time, and they were taught that in school. But now when I tell my grandchildren about it, that how I met the Queen, where I was working, and all this kind of thing, they get so excited. And I just want to say that it was an experience for me to be able to meet her where I used to work.
Well, before I ask for any participation either from the panelists or anyone in the audience, I want to share an experience I had. In 1994, I was a member of the Legislative Assembly, and I recall when the announcement that Her Majesty was coming to Bodden Town, because she did district visits. I can't recall if she did district visits in 1983. I don't think so. I think it was only on the second visit in 1994.
No. She did all the districts in 83.
She did all the districts in 83?
Yeah.
Ah, well, I don't know where I was, but I don't recall. Anyway, in 1994, I had not realized that I was known to so many visitors. I guarantee that I must have received a call from every tourist in Cayman at that time, trying asking me if I could organize for them to meet Her Majesty the Queen. They wanted to be in the front row. Well, you know, when Her Majesty is visiting, any politician who regards his tenure better ensure that his constituents are up front. So I didn't want to disappoint these people who were tourists and or visitors and guests. I told them, well, you're welcome, but I cannot guarantee that you will be in the front because it's Bodden Town Day, and Bodden Towners have to be in the front because I am their representative. On that particular day, I was surprised to see there were as many tourists or visitors as there were Bodden Town people. And the visit went great indeed. Her Majesty I had the opportunity, or the pleasure of introducing her to the people of Bodden Town. Very, very gracious, and it went very well. There was not one person who was off cue in the conversation, and people that I had not seen dressed like that before came dressed past their Sunday best, way past their Sunday best. So I want to come back to Zeta Mae. You are a great keeper of memorabilia. What would you say the general attitude of the Caymanian populace, as you experienced it, was in the 1994 visit?
I think that everybody who could get their hand on any kind of memorabilia at the time was, you know, got it. I don't know how many people still have those things. I know, like, for 93, 94, I got the plate with their picture in it, that it's a souvenir item. And, you know, the cups, and they had so many things to mark the occasion. Like I was just showing Mr. McCarthy, this is a book about the whole 83 visit. And it showed her going through every district and all the MLAs escorting her through the districts and meeting elderly people and school children and stuff like that. I think in 94 that the more focus was on video, capturing everything on video more than pictures. I don't think that they did a collage book like this to mark that occasion, as they did in 83. I mean, I have a lot of stuff from both the visits, but then, you know, like I said, you were in color. So from the video that we watched, you could see the video, everything was in color, and it brought to life. It was, you know, people were getting the VHS videos of it and stuff like that to have for themselves, you know, and purchasing them. The 93, all the photos are in black and white, which was a big difference for me because it shows then and then, you know, color and black and white with photographs. But the people were just as excited. And like I said, in 83, I didn't have either one of my children. I could only tell them about it. But in 94, they were both there to witness it for themselves. You know, the excitement. And I think that a lot of this is very timely, being done, that we're remembering those events when she came here to mark her 70th Platinum Jubilee. I think this is an occasion that now grand and great-grandchildren can also participate and experience what it means to be a member of the Commonwealth. And I think it is fitting for us to always remind our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the monarch and the importance that they place here on our islands, and to be a member of the Commonwealth is a big deal.
Now, Mr. MacArthur, you were a high official at the time of Her Majesty's second visit in 1994. Can you give us an idea of the sentiments among your colleagues in the public service and those that you had dealings with in the private sector as well, because you spoke about the private sector consultative committee. So can you give us a general view of the sentiments surrounding this visit in 1994 of Her Majesty?
When Her Majesty and the Prince visited in 1994, it was quite an exciting time for the people of the Cayman Islands, because this would have marked her second visit to the Cayman Islands. And at that point in time, we looked upon ourselves as having arrived, because we had an up-to-date infrastructure comparable to any of the other Caribbean islands. Our roads were paved. When we look in terms of the public facilities that were available, they were on par with what would be found in any of the other developed Caribbean islands. But what stood out in my mind particularly on that visit was on the occasion when Her Majesty was getting ready to attend the church service at Emsley Memorial Church. A request was made that no special announcement be made as to her arrival or any special arrangement. She was going to worship her God, the God of the universe, and she wanted for this to be a sacred moment. And for a person of faith to have made that observation, she went into the church service, the pastor got up, and he preached his normal service, and then after that she took her departure. And again, that was quite a humbling experience for the people of the Cayman Islands to be making that observation, to be having Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke showing that kind of respect and reverence towards the worship of God, set a very, what I would describe as a royal example to be emulated.
Now, I know that the visit of any important person is a great time of excitement in the lives of many family members and citizens. So I want to ask anyone in the audience who had a child or a grandchild at the time of the 1994 visit, if they can recap or recount that experience that they had in terms of explaining to the child or grandchild the significance of the royal visit, and if they attended any significant event with their child or grandchild, what transpired during the visit.
Mr. Bodden, I addressed that in my speech a moment ago regarding meeting the Queen at where I used to work at the Grand Cayman Resort, and it was a fantastic experience for me. And I also explained that how excited my children were when I was making preparation and telling them like 2 weeks in advance before she arrived here in the Cayman Islands what part she played in our history. And I remember that my son and my daughter at the time was so excited. And up to this day, in fact, up to yesterday, I told my daughter that I'm coming to this, and she was, wow, Mommy, I remember you telling me about this. I remember, hearing you making preparation, and when you came home from work, how you were so excited, and you were telling us about the Queen, and even the day that she came into the hotel, we were there making all sorts of red carpet arrangement for her, and we were all so excited. We were really excited. And I also explained that I'm passing it on to my grandkids now, letting them know my experience. And for me to say now, I didn't share this before, but I would like for now that the school system would tell this young generation more about these past histories in the island, because from what I can gather with my grandkids, telling them about this, they don't seem to know. But I did share my experience with my children, and I am now passing it on to my grandchildren.
I want to come back to my panelists now. And Lennon, I want to ask you to give us an idea, if you can, weigh up the difference in what stands out to you in 1994 visit.
Right. Well, a few things stand out. Ms. Zeta Mae mentioned one, which is the media. In terms of the 83 visit, you know, we were shooting rolls of black and white film, rushing back to the dark room, processing that, trying to get some prints out to the media. No computers, no technology, no cell phones, and black and white, as she said. But in 94, we had color photographs, color slides, obviously color video. So in terms of our work, it was a lot more exciting to share with the public color photographs or video. The other thing that stands out was, as Caymanians say, in 83 she came by plane, but in 94 she came on the Royal Yacht Britannia. So that was a big difference to see the yacht in the harbor, which is, you know, that's a Caymanian source of pride as well. You know, ship on the horizon or a new boat in the harbor. That was symbolic in itself. And Mr. MacArthur touched on infrastructure. And yes, we were coming of age. Cayman was developing as a country back then. In 83, we had just over 16,000 population. And by 94, we thought, you know, how could we manage? We had 20-something thousand. We thought, you know, traffic was starting to be a thing, not like today, but we even had, you know, about 8,000 work permits granted, as the member of the audience said with her co-workers, tourism. So we were becoming modern, more modern. Those are things that stand out the most, the differences. But the actual attitude and the impressions of the people were as strong as they were in 83, I think. The trip went off well. The routes were different. She's the first, well, maybe the only monarch to travel in the North Sound. She didn't stop at Stingray City or Sandbar, but she went out there. She went to Caibo. She came back on
Captain Marvin's boat.
Captain Marvin's boat. I think it was Post Time was the boat. Captain Eugene specifically, who was a former parliamentarian. So yeah, that was, those are some differences in 94 that stand out for me.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a member of the audience who may have experienced both visits, the visit in 83 and the visit in 94, if they could share with us anything that they thought was different in the 83 visit and the 94 visit. What was there anything particular that stood out that contrast both the 83 and the 94 visit?
My name is Carlton West. My name is Carlton West. I was one of the person that was working and making the provision for the visit of the royal family at the time. I was working with Macal Pine at the Grand Pavilion Hotel. And we had to prepare that premises for the royal visit. We had to make sure that everything was spick and span from the floor to the ceiling. When it come to the suite that she was going to stay in, especially,
I was the one that do the tiling for the bathrooms. And it was specially built and made for the royal visit. At that time, we had to work night and day for weeks, for months. And we had people coming in from foreign to take interview, to check the place, how it stayed before anybody even know that they was coming. And we worked and we prepared everything for them. So I know if we didn't make preparation for them, they would be nowhere for there to stay. So McAlpine did a fantastic job at that present time. And that building was designed as the first place for the Queen to stay in this island.
I think as I reflect back, one of the major aspects of between the 83 visit and the 94 was the advance of technology. As I mentioned before, Radio Cayman covered every stop that she made on both visits. And there was no cell phones back in those days. We did have some kind of radio telephone, and we had to more or less bicycle. I use the word bicycle, but they were fast. Somebody traveling very, very fast with a microphone set up from one position to the other one. And as I mentioned before, in the 83 visit, from the time she stepped off of the Viscount aircraft at the airport, we covered her visit until she departed from the airport in the Viscount aircraft. Same thing with the 93 visit from the yacht. But one thing that I haven't heard anybody mention, Miss Annie said something to her at the Legislative Assembly. Well, it had to be the 83 visit when she, I think she presented Her Majesty with something, or at least she had an opportunity to speak with her, and she made a declaration at that time that Cayman would always remain under the crown. And a lot of other differences, but and when you reflect back, I think everybody, was prepared for the visit. And from my aspect, I was not really out on the terrain all the time because I was at Radio Cayman trying to move people around, making sure that we had coverage wherever she stopped. And we did have some audio of her speaking with some people right down in West Bay as she went into West Bay, where I believe Paulette Connolly at that time was anchoring that aspect of it. And both visits, I think, was quite exciting to the whole community.
Now, Anita, you were director of the museum at the time of the 1994 visit. Can you share with us how you prepared your staff, how you yourself got ready for the visit of Her Majesty?
Well, there was protocols to follow that we had gotten from government, and we even had some dress rehearsals of who should be standing where and how to shake hands and how to address the Queen. So it was a lot of nervous excitement and a stressful day, but we tried to have her see the highlights of the museum during that time. She was only there for 20 minutes, and we had to also keep them on track, especially Prince Philip. he was very interested in and had a lot of thoughtful questions. The Queen, I was really impressed with, there she was with her arm in a sling. It was warm weather. She had had appointments before she came to us. But her, her interactions with everyone, because she met our board and trustees before in the courtyard. And then inside, then we had placed our staff, our little space is small. It's a historic building. It's the old courthouse. And we tried to place our staff in the various areas and also explain to her when we were going through, and Prince Philip, about the various exhibits, what the different areas had been used for. Whether, this was the first post office where we had the exhibit for the 200th anniversary of the Wreck of the Ten Sail, but that originally was the post office. But I just wanted to share that I was really impressed with how she tried to make people feel comfortable, at ease. Here we were nervous. I remember showing her one of the artifacts, the Sundial. I'm not sure whether we still have it now in the museum on display, but it was located on the seawall in front of Hogstye Bay. So when people from the districts came in, they were able to tell the time from the sun shining on the sundial, because not everyone had a pocket watch. And I tried to joke with her and said, can you imagine wearing something like that on one's arm? And she really graciously smiled with the humor. And then the other memory that I was really impressed, I was one of those that were able to attend the reception cocktail party on the HMS Britannia. And I was just really impressed with how clean and shiny everything was on that ship.
Now, is there a member of the audience who had a close conversation or actually met Her Majesty on either the 1983 visit or 1994 visit that you would like to, you care to share your experience with us? Were you in close proximity? Did you get a handshake? Did you were so close that you could hear a conversation, what she was saying to someone else? No?
Mr. Bodden, may I, on behalf of Wawa, we all know her as Wawa, Llewellyn. She has asked me to speak for her. Her experience, she said that the Queen was her personal friend, and she recalls when she asked the Queen regarding her arm, the Queen referred as a pony, not as a horse. That's my understanding. And to say this is that she recalled meeting her. I'll have to say that she's 96 years old, 1 year older than the Queen. She's a Caymanian soil, and she remembers this as 96 years old. So I really can't really understand what she's saying in regards to where did she meet her. But I'm sure Ms. Wawa used to work in the tourism industry also, as in hotels and restaurants. Oh, at the gathering. Okay, my understanding that she was invited at one of the gathering. I would probably think it was the governor's residence at the time. So she recalled meeting the Queen and relating to her and calling her her friend. So I am just proud to say that we have a 96-year-old Caymanian in this audience that had that experience of meeting the Queen and talking to her and asking questions.
All right, so we're going to move from the 96-year-old Caymanian to not 6-year-old, but they're probably a little older than 6-year-olds. I would like for a child or maybe 1 or 2 children from the visiting Sir John A. Cumber Primary School to tell us what they make of Her Majesty the Queen. You will not have remembered either visit, certainly not 83, certainly not 94, but what do you think of Her Majesty the Queen? What do you know of Her Majesty the Queen that you'd like to share with us?
I want to share that my mom told me that she is 95 years old right now.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Is there another school child that would like to share something?
I would like to say that so far from what I've heard of people talking about the Queen, she sounds like a really nice, humorous person.
Anyone else? You take. Well,
just to offer 2 brief comments on the financial industry.
So, in 2019, I did go to London. I went to the Queen's Palace.
okay, so while we have the microphone up there, I'm going to Mr. MacArthur next, but while we have the microphone up there, can I ask a teacher, what do you tell your students about Her Majesty?
Say good morning. All right, so sitting and being a part of this conversation, well, not directly involved, but I've learned so much about Queen Elizabeth. Although being a Jamaican, we were once a part of Britain, all of those stuff. But I've never looked at her from this perspective, and I'm sorry that I didn't get that opportunity to as a Jamaican. But being here in the Cayman Islands, I have always encouraged my students that, listen, you need to know your roots, you need to know your culture, you need to know where we're coming from as a people. And I've always told them that, listen, whenever you step out as a Caymanian, as was mentioned earlier on this morning, you have the entire entire England behind you. The British colony is behind you. And I always encourage them that, listen, life is not just all about you in the Cayman Islands, but you all need to look beyond there, because as Caymanians, you all will get the opportunity to travel to England where you can explore different careers. You can learn to expand your horizons. So I believe that this presentation this morning has been very, very good, and I'm sure that the students have learned from it. A few weeks ago, we started looking at the culture of Caymanian, and the kids shared their dance, they shared their costumes, all of those stuff. And I had fun learning, and I'm sure that we will continue this conversation with our 6th graders at Johnny Kumba Primary.
So at this time, I want to come back to my panel, and I'm going to ask Mr. MacArthur if he would share some other brief comments of his experience.
Mr. Moderator, you and I were then members of the Legislative Assembly, now Parliament, in 1994. And you will recall, as a historian, the attention that the Cayman Islands were then getting within the international financial community. We were then regarded as the 5th largest financial center in the world, and we are still a significant financial center today. But unfortunately, within the world community, we would not expect that this would have invoked the level of jealousy that began to be experienced. as a consequence, a lot of attention was then focused on what was then called the Confidential Relationship Preservations Law, or the Secrecy Law. And the view was that the Cayman Islands was like the Wild West, where we were opening our gates to a lot of unsavory characters for bringing funds into the Cayman Islands that were illicit. This was an opportunity to apprise Her Majesty the Queen in terms of what it meant for the Cayman Islands to be a leading international financial center, because allied on the opposite track with the Confidential Relationship Preservations Law, and it was not intended that this law would give protection to illicit operations, but it allowed for guided disclosure of information in terms of questionable conduct by anyone seeking to use the Cayman Islands for business, any form of business activity relating to financial services. We had what was then in place known as the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, and this was a significant piece of legislation that really connected very well with the earlier pieces of legislation that were put in place that garnered this and led to the success of the Cayman Islands emerging at that time and subsequently continuing until now as an international financial center. And this was an opportunity for not only myself, but the members of the Government-Private Sector Consultative Committee, which comprised of all members of Cabinet and the leading operators within our financial industry, who had the opportunity to be in attendance at the luncheon event that was hosted to share their perspective and view with Her Majesty the Queen and also the Duke in terms of what the financial industry was about. So to ensure that upon them leaving the Cayman Islands, they would be sensitized in terms of what it was for us to be regarded as the 5th largest financial center, and for them to have the information in the back of their minds to refute any misinformation that would have been passed on to them in terms of that were not consistent with what we were in effect about.
Now, Her Majesty the Queen is head of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is an organization of nations representing countries all over the world. Many of these nations would love nothing better, or would have loved nothing better, than to have a visit from Her Majesty. I'm going to throw this question out to the audience. What do you think Her Majesty thought of the Cayman Islands to not visit them once, but visit them twice, when there are other nations larger, perhaps more powerful, and to many, certainly the citizens of those nations, more important than the Cayman Islands. And yet, they have not been visited by Her Majesty, not even once. So what does that say for what Her Majesty thinks or thought of these Cayman Islands? Someone from the audience care to give a response?
Because we're so friendly.
Because, speak in the mic, please.
Peaceful, humble, all that. All that about, we have, we are people that will just go to the way to help people because we love people. And I'm a people anyway. And I love my Cayman Island, and I thank Cayman for the Queen to come here and visit us twice. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Would someone else like to make a comment on that? observation from someone from the audience?
Well, I think we may reflect back prior to 83, and the term was used somewhere along the line here today that they thought that we were the island that time forgot. But I think through history, that might have been the thoughts of the foreign press, or whatever you want to call it, that we were the island time forgot, but we were busy, trying to improve ourselves. And I think that Her Majesty came to some kind of that recognition when the £500,000 was sent over there to aid the Falklands War. And then when the financial services started to develop, she recognized that this was also a great asset to the Crown, or the UK sphere, what the Cayman Islands was doing when no other territory or dependent territory was really involved at the level that the Cayman Islands was involved with the financial sector and financial services and what they were accomplishing. And I guess it revolves back around to that the Cayman Islands, I believe we said that we were never aided from Britain, even though we did, I think, get some what was called soft loans, but we were never directly aided. We always paid our way. So I think that played back in that kind of recognition, why she wanted to come down and see really what these folks were all about.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we have come to the end of this session and this event. I would sincerely like to thank the panelists, Ms. Anita Ebanks, Mr. Lennon Christian, Mrs. Zeta Mae Bodden, and Honorable George McCarthy. And of course, last but not least, I would like to thank you, the audience, inclusive of the representatives of the Sir John A. Cumber Primary School in West Bay. I want to congratulate you. You have acquitted yourselves well, both in the singing of the national anthem and the national song, and I loved the sentiments you shared with us of the significance of Her Majesty and this occasion in which we are celebrating. I will now hand you over to the official government representative for the wrapping up.
Thank you, Mr. Bodden. In closing, Caymanian proud, Memories of Her Majesty, the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture, and Heritage extends sincere thanks to the Cayman National Cultural Foundation for the use of the Harkwell Theatre, Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Samuel Rose, for his wonderful remarks, our moderators, author and former politician, Mr. Roy Bodden, and Pastor Alson Ebanks, our panelists, Mrs. Zeta Mae Bodden, Mr. Lennon Christian, Miss Anita Ebanks, Mr. James Ryan, and the Honorable George McCarthy. I've learned a wealth of things that I didn't know before just by listening to these panelists. We also want to recognize and thank the teachers of Sir John A. Cumber Primary and students from the Lighthouse School. We particularly enjoyed the choir's rendition of the national song and the national anthem. Last but not least, thank you to our audience, both here and at home. We look forward to your presence during our other Caymanian Proud events later in the year. As I've stated before, we will be taking this event over to our sister islands for next week. So that one will also be live streamed, and we would be much delighted if you would be able to watch it and enjoy the memories that are recounted from our sister island residents. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. Do have a safe and pleasant rest of your week.